Despite Tyranitar being an extremely popular Pokemon, there's almost no solo runs of it in Emerald. You know, if you search, you'll find only 2 videos, and one of them only has like 18 views, which raises the question, why? As a man of culture and a Tyranitar enjoyer, I wanted answers. So let's find out how fast Tyranitar can beat Pokemon Emerald. You can check the description if you want to know more about the rules of the run. As a pseudo-legendary, Tyranitar has great stats. The only thing that isn't solid is its speed, and we'll cover it later, but I've come to the conclusion that 61 speed isn't even that bad in Emerald. For the moves, we'll see an all too familiar problem. You only get Bite until level 22, and since Dark is a special type in these early generations, we've got that good old-fashioned muscle mage problem. But I genuinely don't mind in this playthrough, and I'd go as far as to say that Tyranitar would be significantly worse if it started the playthrough with something like Stomp instead, despite the stats and the conventional wisdom telling you that a physical move would be better. And I'm not going to cover the TMs because Tyranitar basically learns every good move in the game outside of Bulk Up or Calm Mind, but if you do want to look for yourself, I always leave a direct link to the Bulbapedia Gen 3 Learnset page, it'll be below. Now let's get into the action before we get bogged down in the details, and one of the more surprising things is how minimal Tyranitar's early game is. I'm going to go ahead and say it, Bite is legitimately great outside of the first 2 Poochyinnis you have to face, and we're not going to do that many extra battles. I do really like the experience yield from youngster Billy on the beach here, and from there it's straight to the gym where I'm going to fight all the trainers, and I'm going to hit level 10 at the end. Now this is very refreshing to me because of the last couple of Emerald runs that I've done. They haven't really been the best early, so I have to give Tyranitar some props because it kind of impressed me in this situation. But now I do think it's time to look at Roxanne. I'm going to keep covering this because it's such an integral part of Emerald runs, Generation 3 in general. Rock Tomb and other speed lowering side effect moves, for the most part, they're not damaging moves in the eyes of the AI unless it sees a kill shot. The AI is just going to use them to make sure that it outspeeds you, and then it'll prioritize other moves. Now this will matter in several fights in the run, but Bite is what makes the difference here. I can cleanly 2-hit the Geodudes even at level 10, and there's a chance for a one-shot if I get a crit. And even though it can take up to 5 turns to take the nose pass out, and you'll just have to kind of grit your teeth through some of the potions and the time wasting, this one's pretty clean. Typically a Rock Tomb or 2 is going to slip through. It doesn't do that much damage. Remember, Rock doesn't resist Rock, but you'll see Nose Pass, it uses Block, Harden, Resisted Tackles as I slowly chip it down, and that's the first badge, but there is something much more important about this battle. The real reward here is Rock Tomb. While Bite's special damage made an early Roxanne possible, and it was pretty good, it's now going to take a back seat. With extremely high attack, a stab, hard-hitting physical move is exactly what this Pokemon needed. Now I think we can be competitive, and since we didn't have to grind, we're on a pretty solid pace already. Sadly, this does mean I need to talk about some of the drawbacks of Tyranitar before I glaze it too much. And what's even more sad is that we share a lot of similarities with Aggron. Even though I love that run, I really like the Pokemon, you cannot deny the elephant in the room. Just like Aggron's Steel and Rock typing, our Rock Dark typing gives us a dreaded double weakness to fighting, and we have a key weakness to water, which is a terrible trait for the late game since the 8th gym and the champion battle are both water specialists. Also, just like Aggron, we're in the slow level up group, which means levels are going to be hard to come by. And here's the general rule for me: the earlier that you hit a wall, the worse off the playthrough becomes, because Emerald is fairly restrictive in terms of your options during the first few gyms. Thankfully, the developers do let you skip Brawly, so it's not time for
Brawly, brother.
Yet. But here's a little fun wrinkle that I tested out for this run. Held items are not as plentiful as they were in Generation 2. Most of them are not static, and they rely purely on luck, but I'm going to take advantage of that. Aggron's base stage, Aaron, spawns in the middle 2 floors of Granite Cave at about a 40% clip, and these little guys have a 1 in 20 chance of holding the hard stone. And that's the route that I wanted to go today, just to try to test it out. Now this is very early in the playthrough, and I can't promise you that all Pokemon are going to get this kind of treatment, but I think if it takes you an absurd amount of time, you could just reset and just be back here in like 5 minutes. Now for reference here, I did reset this run 2 times because of this, and I found an errand with the item on about the 17th total errand that I saw, but your mileage may vary. I just wanted to try this approach just to see how it goes. You always got to test things if you want them to be good, but if you are wondering how I knew if there even was an item, I have the property pulled up on my second monitor. In the future, I could maybe just indicate this on the screen, but I'm kind of lazy and I didn't really want to code it in just for this playthrough in the middle of it. You know how it is. And as for the hard stone itself, I just found that the extra percentages and the ranges that it gives in a few fights to be worth it. So I just wanted my personal Tyranitar to be as hard as possible so that we can get things done today. Skipping ahead, I'm going to be using the obnoxious degenerates Pokefan Isabel and Caleb in the background because it's time to talk about the weather, and trust me guys, this is very, very relevant to the run. Hoenn is very thematic for weather conditions and their relation to the box art legendaries, and since Generation 2, rain and harsh sunlight has provided some great bonuses regardless of what format of Pokemon that you're playing. For example, rain will give water moves a 50% damage bonus while lowering fire moves by 50%, and harsh sunlight does the opposite. They also do other things such as rain making the normally inaccurate thunder bypass accuracy checks completely, or harsh sunlight removing that charge up turn for solar beam, making it fired off instantly. But not all weather is created equal, and the point, everything I'm trying to say here, is that Tyranitar's signature ability Sandstream that summons the sandstorm weather condition is easily my biggest issue that I have with this playthrough. Going by what I just said about the rain and the sunlight, one could surmise that a sandstorm might raise the power of rock moves by 50%. Maybe it would lower another type. Maybe it would have some cool interactions with a move, but you would be completely wrong. The only thing that sandstorms do is a tiny little bit of chip damage at the end of the turn to every Pokemon on the field that isn't rock, steel, or ground. From the time that you enter the battle, you get the sandstorm initial text. In between every turn, you get additional text, and then you get the chip damage animation and the text, and throughout the totality of a playthrough, the time really starts to add up. Now, I haven't scientifically tested this, but my gut feeling here is that by the time this run is said and done, there's an additional 20 minutes added to the playthrough solely off of the back of having Sandstream as an ability. And I don't want to go on and on about this, but I just cannot stress enough how much this holds Tyranitar back. And I know there's at least one person out there saying, well, Sandstorm gives rock tops a 50% boost to special defense, which sounds incredible, but that wasn't a thing until after Generation 3. And guys, if anybody left me that comment saying that, I want you to scroll down, I want you to find it, and I want you to shame them in the comment section. And there are gonna be some extra battles here. I fight a single aroma lady on Route 103, and today I need to do the rare candy here to minimize some grinding soon. And I wanna talk about something that I've been contemplating for future playthroughs. I often say that the Trick Room candy is the only early game rare candy, and that's not technically true. In Mauville, you could get the Mach Bike, you could backtrack to Granite Cave and you could grab that rare candy if you were on like a particularly bad Pokemon. I personally think that sounds like a huge waste of time, but it is an option I never really thought of. Remember, in my opinion, that is one of the harder candies to get just because the Mach Bite is so difficult to control. Obviously, you're probably going to see it later in the video, you already know, but you also don't have a flash user until later in the game. I don't catch mine until later, and I don't really see the merit of catching one earlier, but everything I'm trying to say here is that you can get 2 rare candies for Wattson if you are in a scenario where maybe you have to be like doing 27 optional battles, so it's just something that I need to keep in mind personally. The bridge rival fight is interesting because the idea behind the fight and what happens are actually just 2 different things. I've already talked about speed control. We'll talk about it more. What are you going to do about it? And this is where it is most important most of the time. Marshtomp will normally just obliterate you, and the important preparation for this fight is me making sure that Mudshot is not going to 2-shot me. It's not a guaranteed 2-hit range. I'm going to hit level 18 on Marshtomp, which is pretty low all things considered, and the idea is that I'm going to move first. I take a mud shot, and then the AI will outspeed me, and it's just gonna waste some turns on some bad moves like Foresight or Bide, and it's just gonna let me win. Here I get 2 flinches back to back, which is kind of crazy. You would think that would just guarantee me the win on the spot, but this is a pretty great example of how dangerous this fight can be. Mudshot into Water Gun brings Tyranitar to its knees with just 5 HP remaining, but I do squeak this one out. And if you're wondering if Slugma stands a chance in the back, don't waste my time by asking such silly questions. Slug my balls. At this point in the playthrough, you already know that we have Wattson looming in the distance, and I basically went through these 7 stages of grief trying to figure out how I wanted to do this. But first, can I just say how deeply upset that I am that Tyranitar cannot learn Rollout? I know deep within my heart that it makes perfect sense for this big green kaiju monster to tuck its tail between its legs and turn into a ball, but I guess Game Freak does not agree with me. Overall, I think I tried 3 methods here. The first was early EV grinding at the start of the game on some Zigzagoons, but I think that was a really terrible idea. If I knock out 18 Ziggy Raccoons, I can outspeed Magneton at level 23, and I can cut out a few battles due to the extra experience, but that's a very wrong way to look at it. The reality is that 18 battles is quite a lot, and you aren't actually cutting more time than you're putting into it. This is one of those moments where perspective and a reminder that Occam's razor is often the right answer. The simple solution here is that you can just simply play the game normally, get to level 24, and you would just outspeed Magneton anyway. So we scrapped that one. The second one is Fury Cutter. I'm a Fury Cutter stan. If you go west of Maulville to Verdant Turf, you can get the move tutor for this move, and the idea was that a 5-stack Fury Cutter is stronger than a resisted Rock Slide for Magneton specifically, and I'll be the first to admit that I'm a little biased. I do like Fury Cutter. I also like Rollout. I think they're awesome moves, especially in Generation 2. There's so many so-called experts that they never use it and they call it bad. I don't want to get on that tangent. They're great moves. I don't care what anybody says. But in this specific case with Tyranitar, the extra power that it had over Rock Slide, it was too minuscule to warrant the additional time and effort that it would take to get to that point. And I don't want to veer off track too much. The ultimate goal was to do several extra battles, including all of the optionals inside of the gym. I'm going to hit level 23 as planned, and then I'll use that Trick Room candy to hit level 24. That will ensure that we outspeed Magneton. And I really want to talk about Rock Slide, which you learn at level 22, but we'll save that until after the battle. Kind of like the bridge rival battle, the premise of this fight was built off of instinct and vibes, and the fact that a stab Rock Slide from a Pokemon that can knock down mountains and bury rivers will absolutely murder everything that doesn't resist it. Now the problem, as always, is Magneton. It has that overpowered steel typing, and it has that high chance of paralysis. Now we're going to be using the standard Cherry Berry strat here, and since we outspeed, it makes things surprisingly consistent. You go first, Magneton will likely use Thunder Wave, you'll cure it, you'll move again, and at that point, the turn economy has shifted 2-0 in favor of us. Shout out to my Dungeons and Dragons fans out there. Now the numbers here are a 1 in 3 chance to basically get the 3-shot going straight Rock Slide, and you have a guaranteed 4-hit, which I really like in this situation. It felt pretty good. Now this is another example of just not overthinking things. As intuitive as it seems, sometimes you can look at the numbers and you're trying to mathematically try to work things out to where everything is just guaranteed and feels nice. Sometimes it's just slow. Stop relying on the router. Stop looking at the numbers too much. You know what I'm saying? Some people rely on that way too often, and they don't just try things out raw dog. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you got to go in there and just get in it. You know what I'm saying? But that's pretty much the fight. You throw rocks, eventually you win. I think it felt pretty good overall. With Wattson down, I do want to talk about Rock Slide. I'm sure many of you watching are mainly into Generation 1. That's usually what I play. There's a TM there for this move. It's readily available. It's very common, but it's extremely rare in Emerald. In fact, only 6 Pokemon lines learn this move naturally, and I'm sure you guys are curious. It's the Tyranitar line, obviously, that I'm playing, Pseudo-Widow, the Slugma Balls line, Nose Pass, Only Camerupt learns it, not poor Numel for some reason. Game Freak hates Numel. Solrock gets it, and then Game Freak decided Lunatone doesn't get it. So I don't know why, I'm just reporting the facts. Rock Slide is also on a huge list of god tier tutorable moves that we'll never see in these playthroughs because they're locked behind the post game and even further gated behind the battle frontier. It's one of those things that I do wish I could change about Emerald, because access to things like the elemental punches, body slam, mega kick, mega punch, swords dance, and even little things like defense curl and that interaction with rollout, it would just make playthroughs a lot more interesting. But let's not get stuck on that. It is what it is. We can't change it. Moving ahead, the only thing that really happens here is I learned Secret Power. It's not really a required mandatory move. It doesn't really even get that much use in major battles, but it is a very spammable, accurate move that can just kind of mow down anything else. Its sole purpose in this playthrough is to kind of bridge the gap between me having to dump rock slides on stuff, and I found that the playthrough benefited a lot just from having it, so I just learned it here. Now, some of you might remember last week I did a community post that I finally found the 1 out of 64 chance NPC that can spawn when you take the cable car, and I want you to check this out because I actually saw one again just 2 playthroughs later, and a special shout out to that one guy that was like, I've only played Emerald 10 times and I saw it at least 3 times. Now, I call shenanigans on that, but I'm sure I'm a hypocrite right now. I'm sure someone out there might call shenanigans on me because I just saw it 2 out of 3 playthroughs, but what can you do? Numbers are numbers. And I promise what I'm about to say, I'm not being hyperbolic, but it is legitimately one of my favorite things in the entire world when someone doesn't really have like a good perception of odds or statistics or probabilities, and they'll just like say or do something that likely could never happen realistically, and they just kind of expect everyone to go along with it because they just don't know any better. And I don't want to go off the rails, but the most extreme example I've ever seen of this in my entire life was the Parasect race several years ago. There was somebody in there, I'm not gonna name any names or anything, I don't have to. Somebody had a Mount Moon where they only had 3 encounters. Now, just to keep this really quick, every step you take in Mount Moon in Generation 1 is a 10% chance to get an encounter, and you do something like 260 steps in Mount Moon, and the odds of that happening are approximately 1 in 198.5 million. And for reference, if you want to win the Powerball jackpot, it's like 1 in 292 million. So pretty much Powerball odds for that to happen. Now, I think it's personally up to you to decide if someone got that lucky, but I think considering that most of us have never seen a full odds shiny in our entire life after decades of playing the game, and a full odds shiny is over 24,000 times more likely to happen than that, hey, it is what it is. I'm just saying that's the most ridiculous example of somebody being like, I only got 3 encounters in Mount Moon, without understanding that it's Powerball jackpot odds, but I digress. On to the first maxi battle. There's really no risk of being knocked out just yet, but Intimidate is kind of annoying. This is the first of several slower battles due to Tyranitar not having any setup moves, just kind of relying on brute strength. It takes a little bit of extra time, but eventually you do make it through. And that's going to take us straight into Flannery. A strong rock type sort of just has her number. There's not really much to say. Camerupt will be a threat in the playthrough eventually, but Flannery's a little bit weird. Only Numel carries ground damage, but it's really weak and it's inconsequential. And after that, it's basically only overheat and normal damage for the rest of the fight, and we resist both. But this is about the part of the game where Tyranitar kind of just puts its feet back and just kind of relaxes for a little bit. In the last video, I really wanted to show off high money items that I normally end up not needing, but for this playthrough, I can actually do it. In the desert, you would normally always pick up that rare candy, but there's actually a star piece directly north of the entrance, and to the right of that, there's a hidden protein that I'll use later. There's also a second star piece down south, but I find that star pieces aren't really worth going out of your way for because they're not worth a ton, but it is there if you need it. Next up, it's time for some cleanup, and we outleveled Brawly by a lot now, so we can just kind of pretend that we don't even have a fighting weakness. I spam Secret Power here, but in testing before I was using Secret Power, you can just spam resisted rock slides and do pretty well. I've already covered why I like Secret Power, that's why it's here. Situations like this, it feels pretty good, you can avoid healing, but let's move on to Dorman. I'm going to spend this time to talk about something that might sound obvious, but it wasn't to me until I kind of warmed up to it this run. Dig is your standard slacking answer. You dig underground, you'll avoid whatever damage. If it's using counter or whatever, you'll avoid it. Then you'll do damage, then it'll loaf around and you can rinse and repeat and pretty much you have a free fight. The problem is that dig is extremely bad in Generation 3. 60 base power over 2 turns, it's just really weak. And I like the Screech approach. I can lower Slacking's defense on the counter turns, and that in turn makes my beefy stab rock slides hit that much harder. The only drawback is that I am using an 85% accurate move to set up a 90% accurate move, and you'll likely miss eventually, but I've said it once and I'll say it again. I do not mind using lower accuracy moves. If you're gonna do several playthroughs anyway, who cares? Outside of that, the end of the fight kind of flounders and it does take a while. It's fine, but it just kind of takes a while. And as always, you do have the choice of maybe using a Chesto Berry to fight off a Yawn, or you could even use a Persian Berry to smooth out the confusion from Spinda, but I'll leave it with that. The bottom line is that there's usually always something to talk about in terms of Norman. Afterwards, we'll do the typical errands now that I have access to Surf, which includes 2 rare candies, but it's worth noting that earlier routes I was going to New Mauville, the power plant, and I was getting Thunderbolt, but I ended up cutting it out because the reality is that it didn't do anything really. I also want to call out the second rare candy here because I think for the first time in my Emerald playthroughs, I was low enough level to get wild encounters here. I just thought it was interesting, and it's just a good way to show that the slow level up group can hold you back in many ways. But that is going to transition us to Route 118. I might have to pause the footage here because I got a lot to say. Let's just get to it. After my last Emerald video, I wanted to play a Pokemon that was kind of weak in the end game, maybe weak to water, and it was pretty slow. I wanted this because I wanted to test how a quick EV grind session for speed right here in these little patches of grass would work out. Basically, there are a handful of spawns here. All but one of them give speed EVs, and there's evolved Pokemon that give even more speed EVs. And the idea is that a quick grind session, where maybe you take out a dozen or so of these, would get you a few points in speed. And it would just greatly boost a Pokemon's in-game chances without completely neutering its in-game time, kind of like the EV training does early as seen in the Poochyena video. As it turns out, Tyranitar is actually not too slow, so I don't have to do it. And I do have some ideas for some Pokemon that might work in this criteria, but if you have any suggestions, I'm all ears. Let me know. I also wasn't thorough enough with my EV explanation on the last video. Now the principle is the same. There's a lot of people that still don't really understand that EVs operate on a scale, and since you're never going to reach level 100 in these challenges, the 4 EVs per 1 stat point just is not true. But here's a simple formula. I'm going to talk about it one more time. The amount of EVs you have in a stat divided by 4, then that number multiplied by your current level, and then all of that divided by 100. For example, let's just take 128 speed EVs on a Pokemon. That divided by 4 will always be 32, but then your level will scale the number all the way up to its full 32 stat potential. At level 20, you would only get a measly 6 points in speed. At 40, you would get 12. You'd get 16 points at level 50, and then just to toss out a random level that a lot of Pokemon finish the game at level 63, you'll get 20 points. Now, I don't want to go off the rails, but what I'm just saying here, that EVs are complicated, and I feel like the world of Pokemon Emerald solo runs are so underdeveloped compared to maybe something like Generation 1, that sometimes I feel like a crazy person when no one else is talking about this stuff or noticing this stuff. They say ignorance is bliss, and sometimes I do wish I didn't see all the numbers and all the potential for time crunching and all that stuff, but that's another video for another day. Now, a simple way to wrap your head around this is that since decimals always fall off, the efficiency of EV grinding is always slightly less than your level if you're wondering if it's worth it. Now that means if you have a Pokemon where, oh man, I have to EV grind so early, you better hope it's absolutely mandatory because at level 20, you were only using those EVs at around 19% efficiency. Even on a bad Pokemon that needs to be like level 73 to beat the game, you're only using 72% efficiency on those EVs. You get what I'm saying here. I think it's honestly a fascinating subject, and that's why I just kind of feel comfortable rambling about it, even though I know at least 2 or 3 of you are kind of just itching to skip ahead. But this is what makes Generation 3 so great to me, so fun to play. The ability to gain stats through natures or through EVs, it really just adds a lot of strategic depth that's missing in the much more simple Generation 1 and 2 games. And before we get back into the action, we got several other high money items that I want to show off. There's a zinc if you swim up here. There's a calcium further up the trail if you use the acrobike and search near the secret base. There's Shelly with her perfect hair. There's another rival battle where Mosh Stomp uses moves like Mud Sport rather than a move that could 3-shot me. And outside of the usual rare candies, I'm going to talk about a few more high money items. There's a hidden zinc right below the Steven Stone Bridge. There's a nugget right below that. And then on Route 121, you'll find a hidden HP up right after the up and down nerd. Finally, there will be a zinc on the main path. And if you go up and circle around this old man here, you will find a Carbos just laying there in the overworld. And I know I covered all this in about 15 seconds, but that's nearly 34,000 Poké Dollars this game just throws at you for next to nothing in terms of investment, and I'm all here for it. We're going to look at the rival battle in front of Lily Cove since we skipped the last one, and this will kind of show us where Tyranitar's at this point in the playthrough, because if you can't win this battle, you either have a crippling weakness or your Pokemon's really bad. Now once again, we'll get to see that speed control AI in effect, and we're going to take full advantage of it. Mudshot does heavy damage, but when it outspeeds, it goes for a takedown miss into the best move in the game, Mud Sport, and that's going to seal the deal because we already know Slugma doesn't stand a chance. Slugma is awful. Anecdotal evidence tells me that maybe Trico might be a better choice. Maybe some of you are thinking that, but I doubt it because it's very frail. I can actually drop its speed, and this thing is just, there's no way this little lizard could tank 2 stab rock moves from Tyranitar, and I think at least the Mudkip line gives you that dynamic where you have to think about the speed control aspect. That's pretty much all there is to say. Say goodbye to the rival, everybody. Our plan in the mart is to buy a whopping 6 proteins to feed into our attack stat, and I am going to grab 1 additional Carbos along with the 2 others that I picked up naturally. After that, Substitute is still going to be the play pretty much for every video. I think it's really strong, but I'm not going to ban it yet because I think the alternative is a more boring and frustrating playthrough that doesn't really add any value to anybody's life. And I'm not sure about you guys, but I actually do like to enjoy how I spend my free time. And before I start to rapid fire a few sections, I do want to do a quick reminder that my playthroughs are going to be a slight bit slower. If for whatever reason you're someone that likes to directly compare other channels' times, I do use code to make all of the forced double battles outside of Tate Liza and the Steven Stone Space Center battle. I use code to make them single battles again. So on average, it's pretty much like I'm doing 3 or 4 extra text worth of battles at minimum, but I do think it's worth it in the end just to get rid of the double battles. I don't like them at all. Now let's get on with it. And just as my old grandpappy used to say, 2 birds, 1 stone. There's some birds, we got some stones. I think we all know the equation here. Now there is one little bit of nuance that kind of forced my hand to extra Carbos here, and that's Altaria. I will outspeed it by 1 with careful planning, but on runs where I didn't outspeed it or it was just a speed tie, I did struggle a little bit. Earthquake doesn't specifically hit for a ton, but it does make the fight a little bit dicey, especially when you have Skarmory with super effective Steel Wings coming up. Like most runs, it is going to look fairly clean here, fairly easy, but the hardstone damage, the proteins, the little attention to detail to grab a few extra points of speed to make this go how you would expect it to go with the type matchup. Skipping ahead to the Magma Hideout, I'm just going to say it. I have my first reset here, and I have nobody to blame but myself. It's user error. There's a correct way to safely play this, and then there's the completely idiot, stupid way that I choose. In my head, I thought maybe I could play around with the Mightyena, maybe fish for like a swagger, and then one-shot the rest of the fight. It doesn't happen, and worse than that, I don't even play with the Mightyena. I just speedrun through the puppy, and here's what actually cost me. I miss a Rock Slide. I need 2 of them to finish off Camerupt, and giving this little camel an extra Earthquake is just something you can't do, and we go down. Obviously, I still think you could bum rush this fight, and if you don't miss Rock Slide, you'd be okay. But if you want to do this fight the safe way and do it 10 out of 10 times, just set up Substitute. It basically gives you a buffer so that even if you miss a move, you'll still be just fine. And this is one of those things where on the fly, I just thought maybe I would just try something new. It backfired. It didn't work out. It is what it is. 5 rare candies for Tate Liza. I got to level 25. Dark type against a Psychic, you would think it's pretty great, but there are other threats like Claydol Earthquake or even Sunny Day boosted Solar Beams. But funnily enough, Poochyena is what gave us the blueprint for this fight. Now the key is that Xatu can't actually hurt you, so if you just kind of keep it alive and you can divide and conquer the rest. And like always, I went Hidden Power Ghost because it's physical and you're not gonna one-shot Claydol or Soul Rock, so you will likely have to take 2 big hits on Tyranitar, but we are bulky enough at this level to easily hang on. You got a really favorable range on the Lunatone, and that's gonna be 7 of the 8 badges down. On to the Archie battle, and in future videos I think this is likely going to be a video that's going to get the cut because it's just never interesting. It's basically exactly the same as the Maxi fight with the Camerupt swap for Sharpedo, but it happens after the hardest gym in the game, and if you can get past Tate Liza, I would take a bet here that every single run of Emerald that I ever play in my entire life can get past this fight. Like most things, I'm open to suggestions. Maybe you say, hey Matt, why don't you just not go on as many tangents? I would tell you to stop suggesting such stupid ideas, but I think the ultimate goal here is to maybe make Emerald videos be a little bit more digestible so that we get them on par with maybe like a solid 30-40 minute runtime. But I do think you have to start looking at these basically worthless battles like this to see what needs to go in the future. And before we get to the final stretch, I do make the trek down to Pacific Log where we're going to pick up the flight path as is standard, and we will be fighting honorary rare candy Fisherman Ronald. I'll repeat myself from another video, probably every video honestly, where I originally said that, hey, you would only do this battle if you have Thunderbolt because there's like 57 intimidates, but Substitute, it just negates it. I know it's not a groundbreaking strategy, I've even talked about it on several videos, but it's just another countless example of where Substitute is just so good in these games. Finally, we got Juan, and usually you have some fights penciled in before you do the run that might be a little bit tough, but even though we have a water weakness, the fact of the matter is one truth rises above everything else. Love Disc is an absolute dog water Pokemon. It is so terrible. And this is coming from somebody who has a shiny Love Disc. I have multiple shiny Love Disc and I love them a lot, but they're not for battling, brother. I can tell you that right now. I can set up a sub and it can't even break it with a super effective water move. And that's basically all I need for this fight. The last thing I'll say is I don't know why they felt the need to make Kingdra be just an annoying Pokemon. I don't understand. Like, Kingdra's a cool Pokemon. It has balanced stats. It's a very neutral Pokemon. It can do a lot of things, and for some reason they thought, hey, let's give it Double Team, a Chesto Berry, Rest, and make it waste all of your time and just be super annoying. I don't know why they did that. I find it very interesting. I don't hate it, but it is usually the thing that makes one take a little bit longer than it probably should. And hey, would you look at the time? We got 8 out of 8 badges, my friends. Now it's time for cleanup, and I will be grabbing some out of the way candies, and there's even a couple that require waterfall. You already know what it is. There's that typical Fortree and Fall Arbor waterfall candies. I also saved the one down near the abandoned ship until now. And guys, I'm getting pretty dangerous with that Mock Bite Granite Cave candy tech. That's a lot of adjectives. I keep improving, and even though I go by in-game time, I got the candy this time on only my 2nd attempt. I'm not sure if I'll ever get to the point to where I can just first time it every single time. I doubt it, but I am happy where I'm at in terms of movement in the game. Now from there are no extra battles in Victory Road. It goes without saying that I think picking up a candy like the Mock Bite candy, it doesn't take that long, maybe like 30 seconds. I think it's way faster than doing like 3 to 5 extra Victory Road battles. And all of my twists and turns in the run, they've led to a bare minimum Victory Road. At the very end, I will use all 10 of my rare candies. That will take us up to level 61 in preparation for the league. And I say, personally, I don't know about you, I'm ready just to dive in and see how it goes. Sydney's not a hard matchup on paper, but it is where I sort of wish that White Herb was a little more accessible, a little bit quicker to get, or maybe there was just one on the main path. When you don't have a boosting move, you can just be incredibly strong like Tyranitar, but a single Intimidate can just slow you down so much. And I think that's just the overall burden of being a physical attacker in a Generation 3 solo run. I will set up substitute just to avoid further things like sand attack so things don't get harder, and I just kind of win here. There's not much strategy to talk about. I do miss a lot of ranges due to that intimidate, but it is what it is. Tyranitar can handle itself just fine, and there's no reason to ever get the white herb here, but it is worth mentioning it. One day we'll get it, but it's not today. I think in my first Emerald runs, where I generally just blab on for a long time, I initially said that Gen 3 in a lot of ways felt like the true successor to the Gen 1 games, like a true sequel, whereas the Generation 2 games kind of felt just like an expansion. Having a psychic gym leader like Sabrina in Gen 1, or Tate Liza here in this game, and eventually when you get to the Elite Four, there's ghost type specialists like Phoebe or Agatha. It's yet another parallel that wasn't immediately obvious to me. Now, what am I trying to say? I don't know. It has no real relevance. The huge difference between then and now is that I have actual ghost moves, and we're packing a super effective hidden power ghost. Substitute is very useful to make sure that curse is never an issue, and it's completely free to set up because Dusclops will probably just use protect the first turn every battle. And just to sum it all up in one final sentence, this is another matchup where dark types are going to do very well, and Tyranitar is no exception. Glacia is actually the most simple battle in the run. The levels we need at the end of the game and the hard stone just kind of ensures that everything's a one-shot. She's weak to rock, and I think you'll be hard-pressed to find a Pokemon that tosses rocks quite as hard as Tyranitar, and that's all we need to say about this one. One of the things that I love about Emerald that isn't really apparent when you first start digging in and doing solo runs are the little spots and the pockets where you can just like guarantee a setup move or maybe a defensive move. Just like Dusclops earlier, Shelgon wants to set up protect, and it also has Rock Tomb for speed control, which I have covered a lot. Speed control, we don't need to talk about it anymore. If you do have a substitute set up, it goes without saying that your stats can't be lowered, but the TLDR, everything I'm trying to say here, is that Shogun is free, and I need to take advantage of that to get ready for the rest of the fight because there are 3 potential threats going on in this fight. Now, Kingdra does have Surf, but oftentimes it might just maybe set up a Dragon Dance or go for Smokescreen, which cannot affect you behind the substitute. Ironically, this Kingdra is way less annoying than Juan's. We take it out, but let's talk about the biggest threat. I specifically use Carbos to speed tie Flygon in this situation. I could not fit it in my budget to straight up outspeed it, but it's not necessary. Basically, you just want at least one of 3 of these 50-50 chances to go your way, just one of 3. You can tank an Earthquake with the sub, and then you can comfortably survive another one, but the proteins, level 63, they give you basically a 2-shot guaranteed range with Hidden Power Ghost, which is your only neutral option in this scenario. Altaria is going to be a clean 1-shot, and then finally at the very end, you just need to survive 1 hit from Salamence. And something that I haven't really said for whatever reason during this entire run is that Tyranitar has some pretty good special bulk to it. And one of my biggest takeaways is how durable it kind of failed at times, but we survive, we take it out. That's another challenge down. And now, my friends, we have just 1 battle left. As a weak to water Pokemon, all planning came down to Wallace like it usually does. I've been over Water Spout ad nauseum, but basically, the less health Wailord has, the worse the move is. The idea is you want to chip it down to the point to where a Water Spout will not break your substitute, and today the math behind this isn't as intricate as it was in something like the Poochyena video, but the concept is still exactly the same. It's just much easier to execute. Now, this is absolutely imperative for Tyranitar because Gyarados will eventually be the second Pokemon, and if you execute on the whale and you have a sub up for Gyarados, this fight is going to go downhill really fast for Wallace. You have Earthquake to trivialize the Tentacruel, and we did teach Aerial Ace specifically for Ludicolo with proteins in level 64, pretty much a 25% chance for the 1-shot, and I do love the interaction here because Aerial Ace will always hit, so you don't even have to care if it uses 42 double teams. You don't care. The main problem area for this fight and where everything needs to kind of come together is melodic, and the bulk of this little serpentine beauty is why Thunderbolt does nothing for this run, because it's going to survive pretty much anything. With a sub up, you can outpace this with ease, and the one last thing I'll mention here is that you could use a Citrus Berry or even a Shell Bell for this fight if you had some trouble, but I did like the Hardstone for that little extra damage boost. But enough talk, Tyranitar ends the run in style. Tyranitar finishes the run with a final in-game time of 4 hours, 21 minutes, and 34 seconds with just a single self-inflicted reset. Now, given that we've only done like 3 total modern Emerald runs, it's not surprising that Tyranitar just clears everything. I do really love Aggron, but there's a lot of things going on with Aggron. The deck is stacked against it. Game Freak not wanting to give out Roxanne is just one of the 55 problems. I do think it's crazy that Tyranitar is like 30 minutes faster than that run, but I do think a sub 4-hour run is possible if you didn't have Sandstream. I mean, that's just like a hypothetical situation because it's the only ability you have, but I hated Sandstream. It was awful, and I can probably count on like half a finger where the chip damage actually mattered for some ranges. But for the most part, to me, Sandstream is just an infinite time sink that costs you more and more and more time as the run goes on. I hated it. As for the Pokemon and just for playing the game itself, I love the run. I love playing Pokemon Emerald, and this is probably going to be the first of 2 videos that I wanted to do for Halloween, but I had to delay it for one reason or another. You already know, no reason to go into that. Now, keeping on the Emerald theme, I have been wanting to do, there's a lot of runs I've been wanting to do that we'll get to, I don't know, in time. I want to do Lanoon pretty bad. I want to do Cradley, Wellord, and even Hariyama. Patience is going to be the key, but that's kind of like what I'm thinking going ahead. Maybe by the end of next year, we'll get to all those runs, but only time will tell. Now, if you made it this far, you're a real one. I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your day to watch my video, and a huge, special, monumental shout out to my channel members and patrons. You guys really motivate me to keep pushing on, and to no one else's surprise, this one ended up taking me a while to complete, and I think at this point I just need to accept that I'm never going to be ahead on videos again, and with that, I'll catch you on the next one. Bye.